Our learning objectives for today are to learn about innovative strategies for supporting students and to explore how these approaches can fit into your own local school or community context. And we wanted to focus especially on strategies that people are using right now to address the needs of COVID, given that this latest surge has really taken people a bit by surprise. We had thought that by this particular one of our learning community sessions, we would be past the worst of the COVID issues and really addressing some more nuts and bolts elements of success planning. Instead, anybody who has any touches with schools knows that they're back in crisis. There are issues with staffing, with just keeping schools open, with students and teachers feeling stressed, with disconnection. And so we wanted to take some time to emphasize that there are strategies that can be helpful and very effective in addressing kids' needs right now. And so we're just thrilled at the set of speakers that we have today. And we also wanted to share a resource that we have put together to help communities that are thinking about, ways that they can meet the social and emotional needs and other challenges that are facing schools at the moment. So we've put the link to that resource in the chat, or we're doing that right now. And you'll also have access to it through the slides that we'll be sharing at the end. Just to back up for a few minutes, for those of you who may be joining this series for the first time, all of these strategies are elements of a framework that at Ed Redesign we call student success planning. And this is a personalized approach that's grounded in relationships for meeting the individual needs of kids and making sure that they have comprehensive supports. It's not one specific program or model, but there are a number of programs and models out there that reflect some or all of these components. The 4 components that we have are having an adult navigator, an adult who gets to know a child and sometimes a family well and understands their needs, a plan for action to take that information and decide what would be most helpful for any given child in terms of supports and opportunities, and then that system of supports so that there is a set of partners and organizations and resources to help kids succeed, and some kind of a data platform that can help kids get there. So we'll have a chance to explore a number of these components today through the specific examples that our presenters will share with us. And I won't take the time to go into them right now, but these 4 components are grounded in a set of 10 guiding principles that underlie our work. And please feel free to go to our website where you can find out more about what each of these guiding principles means in practice, and more about each of the components. So without further ado, I will pass on to my colleague, Daniela Louie, who will introduce you to our 3 speakers today. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing each of these presentations.
Thanks, Lynn. Good afternoon or morning, depending on where you all are. So today we're going to have 3 different speakers. They're each going to give a short presentation, and then we'll do a Q&A following each one. And then there'll be a larger breakout where we can really dig into some of the content that they share. So the first one is going to be Ellen Wingard, and she's Director of Student and Family Supports at Salem Public Schools in Massachusetts. And Ellen's going to talk to us about universal family engagement and personalized student supports. After that, we're going to go to Charles Davis, who's the Chief Comprehensive Services and Data Officer at Evolve 502 in Louisville, Kentucky. And Charles is going to talk about place-based strategies to address academic learning loss during COVID. And then finally, we're going to hear from Rupa Gupta, the co-founder and CEO of Sown to Grow. And Rupa is going to talk about improving student social, emotional, academic health through an easy and engaging reflective feedback process. So with that, let's start us off with Ellen. And Ellen, you're going to now share your slides, and then we'll do a Q&A after yours.
And just while we're transitioning, I should have mentioned that after we have each of these 3 presentations and the brief Q&A, we will be breaking up into 3 smaller breakout rooms. So if you have additional questions or would just like to engage in conversation on the topic and with the presenter, we'll have a chance to do that in the second half of our session today.
And I'm going to interrupt as well and let you know that if you have questions throughout, you can put them in the chat or raise your hand, but I'll start cataloging them as we go. All you, Ellen.
Okay. Hello, good afternoon from Salem, Massachusetts, in northeastern Massachusetts. I think we have an international crowd today. So we are here prepping for perhaps 3 feet of snow tomorrow, and really humbled to be here and excited to be able to share some of the strategies that Salem Public Schools used throughout COVID, and we continue to use as this latest surge continues. I just want to give a little bit of context for you. We are a small city and a city that's rich in resources and culture and languages. We have fewer than 4,000 students in our schools, and our families and our kids bring multiple things to our schools, multiple riches around language and race, ethnicity, and values and beliefs. And so, we really honor that in Salem. Our families also come with some pretty incredible situations around being able to face economic hardships, systemic racism, housing shortages, food instability. And so we know in Salem Public Schools that we really have to do school differently. We really recognize that that out of school factors impact achievement. We know that about our students. And so we have to plan very well around holistic student supports. And so I just want to also highlight that we partner with our colleagues at the Center for Optimized Student Support, City Connects with Boston College, and the Barr Center. And we implement these frameworks of student support, and they're considered comprehensive, coordinated student supports, to make sure that students have individualized student support success plans. And we have, lots of the components that Lynn talked about in the framework that the Redesign Lab has put out. And so, we really have a commitment in Salem to make sure that we have systems in our schools to think about planning for kids, not just academic and social emotional achievement, but also health and family, knowing that out of school factors really do impact our kids. We want to make sure that our kids have what they need to thrive and are ready to learn. And so, when COVID hit, we had City Connects implemented in all of our pre-K to 8 schools. We started implementing City Connects in 2017. And so we're currently in our 5th year of implementation. We actually went out on a limb and started implementing Barr at our high school as part of our redesign process in September of 2020. So we really leaned into our student support frameworks when we thought about how to support students and families during COVID. So I just wanted to sort of highlight, before I get into the universal family engagement strategy we used, one of the things that we did when talking about leaning into our systems of student support. In our City Connects schools, we have what's called whole class reviews, when we look at every single student's strengths and needs across all 4 domains of healthy development, including academic, social, emotional, health, and family. And we create an individualized student support plan. And during that whole class review, each of our coordinators, which is what is considered the navigator, asked the question during that fall of 2020, drawing on our students' strengths, how can we bolster the student's connection to school? What's keeping the student engaged in remote learning and what isn't? We wanted information specifically about that time period, but we used a structure we were already using to get that information. In terms of leaning into the system of student support at the high school, at our comprehensive high school, again, we launched Barr in our 9th and 10th grade. And we launched again, rolled up to 11th and 12th grade this past fall. And really there are 8 interlocking strategies as part of the Barr model. And we really focused in on making sure the whole student was planned for. And we also converted our 9th and 10th grade to a cohort model. We changed our schedule so that the students were in the cohorts and teachers were in cohorts, which allowed teachers to be able to talk about students and plan for students and what they knew about them. So just wanted to highlight those 2 pieces before I went into sort of the strategy that we added to our reopening and that we've used since. So I'm going to give a lot of credit to my colleague, Emily Ullman, who I think is on this call. She's our Director of Engagement and Community Partnerships. She and I really partnered during the summer of 2020 to figure out what do we need to do to make sure that our kids and families were taken care of during this really anxiety-provoking and tumultuous time. And we looked at all of the different guidance that was coming out from all the different places that we draw from to make sure that our practice is evidence-based. And we really thought about making sure that we had regular connection with family to be able to assess basic needs and basic school needs during the closures in September 2020. And so we developed this strategy called the Family Point Person Tracker, for lack of a better name. And we pulled out all of the tools with the Google, and we paired up teachers in all of our schools with a set of students and families to call and reach out to regularly to ask 5 basic questions. And we gathered data from this Google form for each of the families around their access to technology, their access to what they needed to make sure the physical health of their family was intact, their access to mental health services, food, and then making sure that we were keeping tabs on the students' learning experience, because at that time we had some of our students in school, some of our students remote. And as we moved throughout the year, it changed, into full in-person learning. So we really wanted to be able to gather precise data on who needed what, and at the same time help create connections among our teachers and our families. From that data, our student support staff, our coordinators, our family engagement facilitators, and others would be able to look at that data and really be able to do the necessary outreach in order for families to get what they needed. They would hook them up with different Chromebooks and technology. If they needed a referral for a physician or physical health services, we partnered with our community partners around access to healthcare. Obviously, mental health, we prioritized that during that time. And then, we have amazing community partners with the Salem Pantry and other partners to make sure kids and families had food. So that was the basic strategy. And what I can say is it really required a high level of implementation support. We changed practice before we changed mindsets, which of course was what we all needed to do during the pandemic to make sure that kids and families' needs were met. But Emily and I really worked to make sure that teachers and staff had what they needed to feel comfortable calling families and asking tough questions, and that they had access to the right translation, and really trying to work with our union around making sure that teachers had the time and space to be able to make these phone calls regularly. So it took, I can say in retrospect, it took a lot of that implementation support to get, the schools and the teachers on board, because it was a different practice. We weren't, regularly calling families and asking these questions. Teachers were not doing that. So, I just wanted to sort of highlight that for you. And I think, we gathered feedback at the end of the spring of 2021 from teachers about their experience with the Family Point Person Tracker. And we, the experience was varied. I think many folks thought, oh gosh, I wish I had more time. Other people thought we should really continue this. And so when we moved into this school year, we had some leadership changes, and we really were trying to prioritize some universal family engagement structure. And so schools were able to adapt it this year to sort of personalize it for their own schools. So in one of our schools, one of the coordinators created her own tracker and was able to deploy different staff to make sure that they were able to get specific data, real-time data around kids and families' needs. So, really, this is the strategy that we were looking to make sure was universal, that we knew where to deploy student support staff, and that families also knew we were trying to pursue connections and relationships with them so that people felt taken care of during that time. So that is the synopsis. I'd be happy to take questions if people have questions.
Yeah, we are now opening it up again to the chat, or if someone has a question, you can raise your hand. And we have a really nice turnout. So if it takes me a second to find your hand, I apologize in advance. But actually, can I just ask a question while we're waiting? You shared a little bit about how the teachers responded to this process. I'd be curious how some of the families responded, especially since it's probably something new as well.
Sure. I think the response from families was also varied. We had some families that were very thankful, loved hearing from their family point person teacher. We had other families that were saying, "Why, I'm fine. Why are you calling me? I'm fine." And we really, Emily and I really thought about, do we need to still keep calling these families if they keep saying they're fine? And one of the things that we were able to script for teachers was to say, we know that right now you're fine. We want to just make sure we reach out. We also know that things are changing every week and every day around COVID. And so we know we have fellow neighbors who are losing their jobs. We know that we have fellow neighbors who might need food who normally might not need access to extra food. And so we were able to script a narrative. And if families said, "No, thanks, we're all set, just please don't call me back," we obviously honored that. But I think we had varying responses to families.
Great, thank you. We have two questions that just came in. One is about in secondary, was there an advisory or homeroom model that was already in place to help map the students to teachers? And does the teachers stay consistent over year over year?
Yeah. So in our middle school, we did have homerooms and advisories and groups. In our high school, we actually implemented a crew model this year, and so we have more of that sort of teaming approach. When we first launched this, the high school didn't have that really implemented. We had an advisory, but we really just looked at splitting up teachers and kids so that everybody had sort of an equitable caseload and that we could get the job done. But originally, the high school didn't have that crew block. Our middle school did.
Yeah. Thanks, Ellen. Then there's another question that came in. Were there additional costs for the district associated with the family tracker point person?
No, not that I can remember. The cost was really about resources within the building that were, time. That's really what the cost was. Honestly, when additional needs came up, we were able to access our community partners to be able to support food, mental health, physical health, and our technology department really was a key partner in making sure that kids had the right Chromebook, et cetera.
Great. Are there any other questions before we transition? Although I have one more that just came up with what you just mentioned. Maybe I'll throw it out there. Is in terms of coming up with all of your different partners in those categories, was that sort of done at the district level so that all the teachers knew where to lean in on, or were teachers looking for their own resources as well?
No, we really were clear with teachers that we were hoping that you can help make these phone calls so that we know, but that it really is the role of the student support staff to be the ones to actually reach back out to the families to say, "Let me help you figure this out." And so through our work with City Connects and our work with our community partners and the city of Salem, we had a connection already to our partners that helped with that. So no, we didn't expect teachers to solve the problem, just to help us identify it.
Great. So I see one more question, but we are at time. And so Nicole, I know you asked a question about how to find time for teachers to do this work in addition to their regular workload. During the breakouts, you are welcome to then join Ellen's group and kind of dig more into there. And for any questions that you don't have, maybe we'll put them together and we can put them into the breakout group to answer. So with that, we are going to transition to Charles. Thank you so much, Ellen. We really appreciate it and look forward to learning more in a bit as well.
All right, making sure you see my screen.
Yep.
All right. So thanks everybody. Excited to be here. My name again is Charles Davis with an organization called Evolve 502 in Louisville, Kentucky. In a previous life, I was an administrator in the Jefferson County Public Schools school district, which is the school district in Louisville. And to follow Ellen's lead, just to kind of give you the context of our city, our city school district. So JCPS vacillates between 96 and 101,000 students on any given year. COVID is, kind of made that a little bit wonky. But we have a very diverse district. There are a number of different languages spoken within the district. It is a majority minority district in that there are a high number of African American, Latinx, and also immigrant and refugee populations within our district. So very diverse, I'm not originally from Louisville, but not what I thought when I first came here. But what I just really want to talk about is how the implementation of an initiative really can be the innovation that a lot of people talk about. And so just sharing our work around community learning hubs. So to begin this work, just to kind of level set, really what we identify as our theory of action is a cross-sector collaboration framework, which really distills down to three pieces. One is really the identification of a sector failure. So there is some problem, like a pandemic, that has faced a community that no one sector can solve by itself. And I think that people really began to understand that pretty clearly. This is not one thing that a district, not a city government, nonprofit community, nobody could do this by themselves, figure out how to support young people. Second, we had to establish collaborative structure. So how are we actually going to work together to be intentional? Because once we identify that failure, that sector failure, it helps everybody to understand why they're actually at the table. And what we really wanted to comprise were people who could address policy, people, and ultimately purse strings to support this. And then the third piece was to communicate public value. So a lot of times when people who are doing, the yeoman's work of working with families and kids, you're just kind of doing it in silence and in your little corner, but we really tried to signal boost this. And what it did was it allowed other people who were not traditionally partners in education, so to speak, come to the table and figure out how they could support us additionally. So really, what our role in this was to aggregate and to amplify needs. Because what we discovered at the beginning of the pandemic was there were a lot of people in decision-making tables who had no idea what the on-the-ground perspective was. Schools closed in Jefferson County in April of 2020 and just really opened up in earnest a year and a half later. So all this time, kids were just, many people didn't know where kids were. To be quite frank, they could be at home, they could be at grandma's, parents had to go back to work. So there was just a lot of uncertainty around how we were going to support kids because so many resources had been pushed through schools that there really wasn't the community-wide infrastructure to support that. So really what we did at Evolve 502 is begin to cultivate collaboration. And so what I've always known is that we already had all the components. They just were not organized. And that's really where I began to have a more robust relationship with Harvard around their success planning and just many of the technical aspects that we could really put a framework around how Evolve 502 as a backbone organization could begin to support that. So again, in 2020, we really launched our Community Learning Hubs initiative, serving a little over 2,500 students. We were able to segue that into our first community-wide summer learning initiative, which is called the Backpack League, where we were able to serve this past summer over 6,000 students in a 6-week program that was located in a number of nonprofits, churches, even school locations and community centers. And what we're looking at now in a closer partnership with the district is what they're calling the future state, where we can support tens of thousands of young people by, again, more collaboration, more intentionality, and leveraging more resources. So I know one question that I always get is, well, how did you make all this happen? Because, Evolve 502, there's probably about 10 of us on staff, and really 2 to support this edge of the work is really through collaboration. And this is just kind of a framework to just show all the different pieces. From funding, we had to have resources. So we had the city government, we had the district, we had corporate donors, we had foundations. Again, by talking about the work, people just were like, how can I help? Even if I can't be out there tutoring kids myself, how can I help? And we needed money to make that happen. we needed additional locations. Community centers opened back up because they shut down around the same time as schools did. But we also have an entity called Blocks, which supports out of school time partners, OST partners, who really helped us to get more participants, because what we needed was more places for young people to go, not only during the school year, but also during the summer. And so we partner with them to help us. One thing that we heard was that it then and now, that nonprofits are stretched from staffing. It's very hard to get staffing, to find more. During the pandemic, we were able to leverage substitute teachers because teachers were teaching all day. So substitutes were not. So we were able to deploy them out to organizations. But then we also went to the local colleges and universities and hired from their College of Education students to go out and be supports at these locations. JSPS provided daily food service. They provided breakfast, they provided lunch. They would actually go out and take meals to these various locations who could handle the capacity. They provided transportation in some regards. And like I said, they provided other supports. Harvard, of course, provided a lot of technical assistance. And then we also had other supports like Summer Works, which for the summer was a youth employment program. We were able to hire kids to go out and support. United Community is sort of an online social service referral system that we were able to plug families in, and we're able to do on-demand COVID testing at these sites. So as we pivot from crisis to recovery, I always try to be very intentional in making sure that we are making that pivot, because February 2020 is not the same as February 2022, even though, as Lynn said, we're still in a situation that we didn't expect to be in, but many things have changed. So looking at the data, looking at anecdotal and just what's going on the ground, what we've determined is that there was a lot of learning loss. And so what we wanted to do was, with the resources that are available, how do we begin to reach kids in a way that we can, one, know the specific intervention that's going on, and two, remove barriers, primarily transportation and cost. Those are the resounding things that we hear all the time. Parents don't know where these opportunities are, they can't get to them, and the ones that they can get to, they cost too much. So looking at a national resource, the National Student Support Accelerator, that does a lot of work around this idea of high impact tutoring, looking at this definition, that it is intentional, one-on-one or small group interventions towards a specific goal. It responds to individual needs and complements students' existing curriculum. So that's what we decided to do. Just looking at your traditional tutoring services, I began to research and just kind of say, well, what are the actual pieces that exist? So there's a physical plant, there's a place where people go to get tutoring. They have a standardized curriculum, worksheets or whatever they utilize. It's a safe, it's a clean environment. There's marketing, so there's a communications plan. The real game changer is student diagnostics to actually know where the young person is. And then there's staffing. So, as I began to ruminate, I said, well, if we can't open up our own tutoring site, can we just kind of replicate a lot of these different factors? And so what we came up with is Community Learning Hubs 2.0, which is targeted intensive tutoring. So again, we have a number of locations. So we have OST partners, we have churches, we have community centers. We have a standardized curriculum through a partner that we work with called I Would Rather Be Reading, that are all former JSPS teachers who have a curriculum called Trauma-Informed Reading Mentors. And so I'll jump over to the staffing portion, where we are, again, training the tutors, because we recognize that there is a strain on OST partners because they just don't have the staffing right now. So we didn't want to put another thing on their plate. So really what we're saying is, you bring the kids and we'll bring the staff. So right at this point, we've hired 67 college students and still hiring more to go out and support tutoring at these locations. The Metro United Way, and again, their Blocks initiative is providing the safe standards, because we have a lot of people who we had not worked with in the past, but we want to make sure that these were safe locations for young people to attend. So that's kind of a rubric that we run organizations through to just make sure that it's a safe, enriching environment for young people. JSPS, their research and evaluation department, is providing data for a student diagnostic, so we can really, they have a short cycle assessment called the MAP test. I don't know if you all do that in any of your districts, but they're providing us those data so that we can really begin to hone in on what students' needs are, and the communication plan, working through parent engagement, the Urban League, a lot of different partners. So a lot of people ask, well, why this approach? And I think there's really three reasons above all. Working with out-of-school time partners taps into valuable and available time. As you all hear and I see in the chat, there's never any time. During the school day, there's no time. So where do we go to? Let's go after school where there is time. The second reason is that intentional connections to support students for trusted partners can only benefit them. Joyce Epstein talks about that a lot, that, you know, in school community partnerships, that organizations need to talk about their supports for young people and communities. And the opposite of a disconnected youth is a connected youth. So let's put more connections around young people. And then collaboration allows us to leverage more resources from the district and the city. I mean, over the past 2 years, for all the initiatives I've just spoken about, we've been able to leverage over $5 million to support all this, from government, district, private donors. And it's just because we were able to, again, amplify and signal boost that need. And then establishing just to wrap up, establishing that infrastructure has allowed us to put whatever we want in there. So we can provide academic services. We're in current talks with another college to provide mental health supports, because people always say we have these supports, but we just don't know where to put them. We have the places to put them. And so now, once we establish that infrastructure, we're really only limited by our imagination. So I will stop there because I think I'm a minute over, but I will have to take any questions.
Thanks so much, Charles. And same as before, feel free to put a question in the chat or raise your hand, and we will find you there. And I can ask a question if we don't have one quite yet, which is sort of the same question I asked Ellen about families' reactions to the work that you're doing that is so different since it's closer to their homes. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, it's an easy transition because we're really kind of using those existing organizations as sort of brand evangelists for us. A lot of times districts don't always have the connection with families and communities that they would desire to, but the Boys and Girls Club does. And so what we are doing is bringing everybody around the same table to ensure that we're all speaking the same language. So the trusted relationships that parents have and families have with these existing organizations, we're able to leverage and provide the school to adjust their practices to better reach and better engage those families.
Thanks, Charles. And two more questions, and then we might have to transition. One is,
Sure.
What is the role of the public schools in this model?
The public schools have just, we have a great superintendent. Once he, really understood it, he got it. As I said, we've been able to leverage a lot of the recovery dollars. And so he's made available, he said, I don't know if I'll ever be able to say this again, but whatever you want, we'll pay for it. So like I said, they have, they provide food, they provide teachers, they provide curriculum, they bought all the kids Chromebooks over the pandemic. They allowed those kids to take them to their after school program. So everything is just really on the table. And it's just been an awesome partnership because it benefits them, because they were like, we don't know where all these kids are. How can you all help? And so bringing other people to the table who have those relationships helps them in the end.
Great. And I'm sure Michelle's going to yell at me because we're at time, but a follow-up for that, because it's connected, is just, are you concerned about the sustainability of funding post-pandemic? And if you could answer that in 30 seconds.
Yes, because we are building an environment where the money is not coming all out of one pool. In addition, the district is also received some new tax levy dollars, and part of that is to support extended learning. And so right now, what we're trying to do is to weave ourselves into that funding, so that'll be sustainable moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you, Charles. So we are going to now move on to Rupa. And again, Charles will have his own breakout that we can all join and continue that conversation. Rupa, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen. All right. Can folks see that okay? Hopefully. Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Rupa Gupta, and really excited to be here. And thank you to both Ellen and Charles for such great ideas. I was like taking notes as you guys were talking. So just by way of background, I am the founder of Sown to Grow, which is an organization that supports students' social, emotional, and academic health. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But my background is also coming from schools. I most recently was in both district and school administration roles in San Jose Unified School District, which is one of the larger districts here in the Bay Area, and supported kind of across K-12, but also most recently was really focused on middle school. And I was actually smiling when Ellen, you were going through some of the systems and tools that you guys were building in the Google Suite. That's exactly where I was in my journey, and actually sort of like had this moment of, I wonder if there's a way to build some of these tools in to kind of make them such that they're scalable across outside of just my school and my building. Could that be powerful? So I took a leap that I've never done before, and have been kind of working on building some of those tools and supports such that they can be, hopefully some of these practices that we're talking about can be implemented in easy and scalable ways, where every school and every district isn't trying to hack together their own Google form system connection, so that's a lot of where we're coming from in support of schools. Our connection into the Harvard Ed Redesign program, one of our major district partners, Metro Nashville Public Schools, which is a large district in Nashville, Tennessee. We've been lucky to partner and kind of collaborate and build together in support of their Navigator program, which is very much designed, as Lynn had described earlier, to have kind of that really key point person in a building where student relationships can really be developed and honed, and challenges that students might be facing are proactively identified. So, at our core, like I said, our focus is on building, deepening those relationships and supporting student social, emotional, and academic health. And we do that. Our anchor is a regular and consistent process of students checking in, where they're able to check in on ideally a weekly basis, if not more frequently, on how they're feeling, what's coming up for them, what's going well in their kind of experience as a student, in their community, in their friendships, and what's been hard. And as you can imagine, students often lift up things both in school and outside of school. I'm just going to give like a 30-second just a preview of what it looks like in the actual system, because I feel like that often brings it to life a little bit. And then I'll go through some of our just like learnings and insights. So, sorry, your guys' beautiful faces are all covering here we go. So just what that looks like in an actual kind of a platform. It's a technology tool that kids like log into using Clever or whatever. And when they log in, they see something like this. How are you feeling? And on a weekly basis, what we find is students are able to kind of have a more, like an emoji, right? Something that's just like easy for them to communicate, but then also have some space to write open-ended what's going on with them. So, as an example, a student might say something like, this week was rough. I got into a fight with my mom, something like that. One thing just to share, we have been totally humbled, frankly, by how open and honest students are in this type of space when invited to share that regular routine of how are you? It's something that while I think all of our systems want to be asking kids, it's hard to create the space in kind of a consistent way. And what we've found is when invited, students, especially over time, like over the course of the year, and I'll show you a little bit of data on that, really start to feel comfortable and open up. There's some of the students in schools that we work with were recently highlighted at a board meeting, and the student board members who are high school students actually shared about their experience. And one of them said, it's really hard, even if I have a great relationship with my teacher, it's really hard to walk in and tell them I'm struggling. Like, that's a really hard thing for me as a young person to do. So what they shared was like having a space where they could like, kind of like put it out there and then have an adult check in with them. Like, that was one of the things that they really valued, that this student shared, that he and his friends really valued. So that's kind of the routine, emoji, short reflection. The other thing that I just wanted to showcase is how some of that can really lift up a student's emotional journey. So in our system, because we're able to kind of connect the dots over time for an individual child, students start to see their own ups and downs over time. And I think a lot of this really highlights that, hey, it's normal to have ups and downs. We have normalize that. The goal is to like normalize some of that, and help them start to draw connections, so they can see, oh, what was going on? Oh yeah, I remember why I was feeling in a funk. What did I do to get myself out of it? What are the strategies I used, or how was I able to process that? So that kind of journey line coupled with both kind of how side by side with how their own reflections, their own written kind of responses, as well as teacher feedback, becomes like a really powerful artifact, and supports the learning journey we found. So that's kind of just to give you, I feel like that sometimes just helps folks understand exactly what this looks and feels like. So, the weekly routine, I will say, often does, in most schools that we work with in secondary, it often takes place in like a homeroom or advisory type of space, if that exists. If it doesn't, we do definitely work with schools where they just kind of carve out time out of first period every Thursday or whatever it might be. So we are all about trying to create kind of systems that can be consistent. That's one of the biggest learnings, like the consistent, and I'll share a little bit more about that, but that's the consistency is really important. And then with that, because, all of the information is captured in systems, we're able to, roll that up for the right people in the right moment. So one of the things I think, Ellen, you might've mentioned around how circumstances changes for kids. A student who at the beginning of the year is like, I'm feeling great, I'm excited about school, I'm thrilled to be here. 2 months in, their circumstances, something about their circumstance might have changed. So our hope is to really be able to kind of have a real time pulse on the emotional well-being and health of, a school, and then be able to proactively lift up students who might need a little extra support. So, hey, these are 3 students who said they've been feeling down multiple weeks in a row. How do we make sure we're checking in with them proactively, or referring them to the right resources if it's a situation that they might need help for outside of school or whatever it might be. So it's all about creating kind of those systems and routines to allow for proactive support, and the real-time kind of weekly check-in process allows for that, which is cool. And then over time, we're seeing when kids do get that proactive support, I think a big part of our goal is to make sure every child is seen and supported so they can learn at their best, right? That's I think our big goal. And I think so much of the emotional connectedness work is knowing that, and all the research that supports this, that when students feel at their best, then they can learn at their best. And if that first part's not there, it's unlikely that we're going to get to that second part. So that's the kind of the goal, the whole goal. A couple of just learnings and best practices that we've seen when implementing these types of systems, check-in routines where, kids are having space to lift up and share more, more either emotional or academic challenges. One is the consistency of routine. I struggled with this at my last school, where we would only check in with the child when they were struggling or when they got in trouble, or something like that. And that's not where the learning happens. If they're only checking in or only asked to reflect when there's a negative experience or a challenging experience, then we're not highlighting, what does it feel like when things are good? What are the circumstances that are creating this? And how do we replicate that? The second, I think is a universal truth. Not only, while it's been highlighted in the time of the pandemic, I would say all the time, starting simple routines to start is really, really, really important. Our focus is on a simple routine that's engaging for kids, easy for teachers to get off the ground. We can always deepen practice over time, and we have kind of pathways to do that, but starting simple in a place where teachers can feel success and feel connection with students, deepening and amplifying quickly, is really important. And then building it such that there's a system for a school. So we don't want kids, for example, to be checking in, a teacher to be responding, and then a challenge gets lifted and there's no one to help with that challenge, or there's no way to kind of sort of flag and elevate. So it is about making sure that you're starting simple, but all of the pieces are in place from a school's perspective. I will say, I showed that quickly, that emotional journey line. We have found, at my last school, we also did it. We did sort of we use Google Forms and things like that, which is really helpful for us as school administrators, because we could see data real time. But what we've seen in the last couple of years, and we actually just did a research study in partnership with Lean Lab Education on this, when kids don't see their own data, they're kind of throwing stuff into a black box, and it can be a little like, it's not as powerful as it could be. The learning we find can really be elevated when students can start seeing their own sort of trajectories and trends over time and draw connections. That's where like they're starting to learn what muscles, what capacity, what strategies, what things work for me. So finding ways to kind of be able to lift up that trend over time for students to see, not just for adults to see, but for students to see in their own kind of journey can be really, really powerful. And then the last that I'll highlight is just that kind of connection and back and forth and feedback from teachers. And I'll just say what's written here is, feedback from teachers can really help students feel seen and engage more deeply. And I would say the opposite is true. If a student's sharing things in some sort of check-in process and nobody responds, it's actually a very quick way for them to feel unseen and for them to disengage, So if you are going to kind of invest in this type of system where you're figuring out ways to kind of real time understand what's going on with students, you need to, I would say like an important part of that is having a tool or system that allows for teacher feedback for students to feel that response and see it. Because that's when they, actually kind of give more, when they feel heard and when they feel acknowledged and validated. The last thing I'll show, and I wasn't watching time, so I'm going to just look to the Harper team to tell me if I'm way over. For folks who saw this report come out last month, I feel like it definitely made its circles, the Surgeon General warning on youth mental health and how it's there's just a lot to be concerned about. And I think all of us can feel that in our buildings and I feel it when I'm visiting classrooms. But one thing is when we do get this right, it can really make a difference. So for example, in our system, we're able to see how kids are feeling kind of week over week, month over month, when they do have a regular check-in process. And this is what the data has looked like in the first semester of this school year. When kids are kind of engaging in a regular space where they're invited to share, they're putting stuff out there, they're getting responses. When a challenge is lifted, it's kind of the right referral is made or the right support is made proactively. All of that kind of has led to students feeling more and more kind of supported and frankly happier to be in the building, which is just a really exciting data point. And again, we did a research study that was funded by the U.S. Department of Education this past semester that validated these results with like more kind of like deeper dives into individual schools. So it's been an exciting journey around what is possible. And we're all about kind of supporting these types of practices in schools, either like, we're trying to design systems, but excited to share through the redesign program, like learnings, if you're going to think about your own system or modifying your own system. So with that, I think I'm hopefully not too far over on time. My contact information is here, so if you have questions, or we'll go in the breakouts as well, but I would love to hear if there's any questions. Let me see if
Thanks, Rupa. And there is one question in there, and I think if we are a tiny bit over time, it's my fault for not controlling the intermediates before this, so it's not you. So we'll maybe answer this question, and then I'll turn it back over to Lynn for us to go to the breakouts. Can you share more about what the process looks like when a teacher identifies a student who's experiencing a challenge and how the teacher accesses the system supports in place?
Yeah, great question. So there's a few different ways. We're all about creating multiple lines of defense, if you will, and making sure that teachers don't feel kind of solo in that like, oh my gosh, I just like kind of either learned something about a student and now I've got this burden and I'm not totally sure how to handle it or how to deal with it. And I think one of the things we hear consistently from teachers is they don't always feel super well equipped, haven't all been trained, or maybe the training's been, so it's something we really hear and love. So I appreciate the question. So there's a few different ways. One is, I mentioned our work with the U.S. Department of Education. A part of that funding has also been to make our technology smarter. So as an example, when students share stuff, we're able to understand what students write about and give teachers examples of feedback responses, kind of suggested feedback based on what a student wrote. So it's like a scaffold, it's like a little expert on a teacher's shoulder of like, hey, here's something, here's like an appropriate way to validate that student's emotion or affirm, you know? So that's one thing that is, that's more of like a technology, like hopefully a thoughtful technology support. All of our systems roll up into kind of school admin portals. So another space where technology is helpful is if there is ever a reflection that's very concerning. So like high levels of depression or anxiety that's kind of noted, any reference of course to self-harm or harm of others, death in the family, things like that, those reflections actually get flagged and an email automatically gets sent both to the teacher, the principal, and anybody else the principal designates, which usually includes if there is a counselor or social worker on site, somebody like that. So then it's like, hey, there's been a concerning reflection written. The whole team kind of gets this email that's like, so you guys can collaborate and it gets lifted up for you. And then the last I would say is just more in partnership with schools and districts that we work with. We have some best practices that we've seen because, you know, at this point we work in districts across the country and, you know, every approach I feel like is obviously contextualized to the community that's being served, but there are certain practices that we see work really well. So we share when building these systems, like here are things that we've seen work in other places, like here's like a collaborative referral process that we've seen work. Here's, you know, those types of things that are more district systems, less about kind of our direct work, but we really try to work in partnership and collaboration with the schools and districts we support to make sure that if something is lifted up, it gets to the right place as quickly as possible.
Sorry, I'm muted. Thank you for that. I know we have one more question, but we're at time. So I'm going to turn it back to Lynn. And then Victoria, if you wanted to join Rupa's group, you can talk about the flags that are filtered and the relationships with the students identified. So thanks so much. So Lynn, I'm giving it back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to each of our three presenters. Such a range of approaches. And I know there's a lot of interest in hearing more about them and having more of a conversation with our speakers. So what we will be doing now is breaking into three smaller groups. And Michelle will be shortly putting up those groups, and you can choose your own adventure here. You can pick which of the speakers you want to be with. This is an informal opportunity to ask additional questions and also share what's happening for you locally in your own contexts. We'll take about 25 minutes in the groups, and then we'll come back to just share across the three groups at the very end. So Michelle, if you could open up the groups and everybody can pick which one you would like to participate in.